The next session centers around complex workflows and how AI is transforming them. To speak on the enterprise use cases of AI, please welcome Insight Partners Managing Director Praveen Akir Aju, Joao Mora of Crew AI, Ritika Gunnar of IBM, Itai Asio of Salesforce, and Chad McAfee of Oracle.
Welcome, everyone, to the panel. We have a very distinguished set of speakers here today, representing everybody from a founder all the way to infrastructure providers, one of the top agent providers, as well as one of the legendary companies in this space, doing AI since the beginning of time, I guess. So what I was going to do was just to kind of dive straight into the questions, and the speakers will introduce themselves as we go along, given we have a lot of interesting things to cover. Let me start off with this kind of broad concept. When we came into 2025, it was touted as the year of AI agents. And we heard throughout the morning in terms of the tremendous progress AI agents have made. Yesterday's announcements from OpenAI obviously continue to move the frontier. So what I thought was just to kind of get a sense from you in terms of what is the state of AI agents as you see it. Because on one hand, you have all these tremendous developments on the technology side. On the other hand, you have sort of this a little bit of disillusionment, if you will, at least from some of these reports that have come out in terms of the effectiveness of these AI agents in production. So I just wanted to maybe get started. Joe, I'll kind of start with you. So you're a builder. You're one of the original sort of AI agent providers, open source framework, Crew AI, which has been tremendously popular and widely adopted. So, maybe give us your perspective, and then we'll kind of go down the line here.
Yeah, it's interesting because I remember you go back December last year, everyone was talking about this is going to be the year of AI agents, and everyone was so focused on that, right? And then you go through the year, and there's a lot of ups and downs and bumps along the way, but I got to say that things changed so fast. Like, we're just talking about it outside every day, something new happens. When I look back at the beginning of the year, I think everyone was still trying to figure out how to adopt it and what this would look like. Now it definitely changed it. You definitely see that the bar for understanding what needs to have to go into production, it's something that people really get it. A lot of these companies are already thinking about AI agents as infrastructure now. And there are definitely many companies that are getting to the other side of this with major success. And we're seeing this. I mean, one of our customers, I think, went from 2,000 groups of agents to over 120,000 in 15 days.
Wow.
It's insane. Once that kind of clicks, how it expands, right? And I think that's the thing. Some companies are still struggling with getting that to click, but once they do, the expansion definitely is in there. But it has been very excited to see that.
And maybe
from
some
AI.
use cases, if you want to just give us quickly a couple.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it definitely seems like people are over-indexing on back office use cases more than front office use cases. There's a lot going on go-to-market in general, a lot on pricing operationals. There's a lot of things overall in backstage. Know your customer as well. So I think definitely the companies are still a little kind of afraid of going in front of their customers. So they're let's operationalize this internally and get the efficiency gains first, and eventually we bring this outside.
Makes sense. And Ritika, IBM has been sort of playing the full stack, right? You've launched some infrastructure products. You have your own models, lots of middleware, in addition to building a lot of agents. So maybe your perspective, that'll be super helpful.
Look, what we see our clients doing is everybody is building agents, and agent sprawl is real. And from our perspective, we want our clients, and we see our clients building hundreds of thousands of agents, whether they be using Crew AI, other open frameworks, or agent builder tools. Really, we're entering this zone now where just like software had a software development lifecycle, agents have an agent development lifecycle. And where I would say earlier this year, we were focused a lot on the build aspects. Now you see enterprises really focus, and organizations, forget even enterprises, focus on what are the things that you need to do to have the full agent development lifecycle, from what you build, optimize, when you put it in production, how are you still optimizing, securing, managing the entire life cycle. And so, we just kind of published today a life cycle guide for what does agent development life cycle look like, because it is going to be the important thing that takes this proliferation of agents to really operationalizing and starting to see those outcomes and that scale in the enterprise. The second thing I'll tell you is that in almost every implementation we do in production, we see actually a spectrum between fully agentic to some deterministic. And the notion that most workflows, most applications are gonna have a spectrum of this is really, really important. And to enable that in the heterogeneity of the way all of these agents are built. So those are kind of like a couple of the key things that we see right now.
That's very interesting. And just again, as I was asking Joel, what are the use cases that you're seeing?
We ironically, like Joel talked about like the productivity use cases, we actually see them in 3 particular areas. Most organizations have some sort of customer care use case that they've built an assistant somewhere, and they want to agentify that. And they want to agentify that because it allows them to have a very personalized experience for their end user. So that's a primary one. The second one is the back-end productivity. We call it AI productivity use cases, where you see, like whether it be for HR, supply chain, sales, finance, we see those kind of use cases. And of course, in IT, what does it mean to have IT optimization of your IT infrastructure, software development lifecycle with all the coding tools that we all know? Those are probably the primary 3. I would say even at this conference, I was talking to someone during a breakout, now we're starting to see the verticals kind of pop out. Like I would say we were in this era of like, what does it mean to have horizontal use cases? And now we're starting to see some of those verticals kind of pop up as well.
Makes sense. Very interesting. Itai, Salesforce has been sort of the forefront of this, right? You guys launched Agentforce. You talked about this sort of shift in paradigm in terms of even the way you charge for software. So from your vantage point, how do you see the progress of adoption of Agentforce, and what are some of the learnings?
Yeah, so I think it's pretty amazing. Like about a year ago, not a lot of people were talking about agents, right? That conversation just started. We have this saying that it's been true like many years ago. It's still true. Change will never be as slow as it is today. So the not just the rate of progress, but the rate of change is just accelerating. And so it's not surprising to see some of those like papers saying like 95% of these everybody's experimenting and trying to see what actually works and how to see the ROI from it. So I think it's a very natural place that we are in this state. And now, so
we're like in the second inning, third inning, you think, or like what, if you?
I think the innings are also getting shorter, though, right?
Right.
And so I lead the incubation for our AI research group at Salesforce. So we're looking at kind of like how is AI research really, and kind of like what are we doing to actually push the envelope? And we were talking about use cases before. So like some of the fundamental and like low-hanging fruits are things like getting service calls and some of those things that are obvious to how can you automate that? How can you automate some of these processes? And as we're kind of getting deeper into like what does an agent mean? How can I actually automate some of your work processes? It's really about those like deeper areas in the organization, and that's where it becomes really difficult for each organization to have their own processes encoded into how can an agent actually learn your own processes and therefore automate what you really need to do.
Yeah, makes sense. And Chad, I think you guys have a very interesting vantage point as well as an infrastructure provider. Obviously, you have one of the most sort of largest systems of record. How do you see this from sort of a more of an infrastructure perspective, in terms of the workloads that you're seeing?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. So, I got actually a unique vantage point because we also run a lot of some of the largest applications in the world as well in the infrastructure. And I think I heard you mentioned earlier about like the agents have become infrastructure. I think the biggest change that I've seen just over the past year, when we talk about whether it's the year of Agentic AI or not, is the infrastructure to support the agents to be able to get to a point of scale. And that's been a rapid increase. That's everything from like the orchestration layer, observability, and so forth. So a lot of interesting use cases, that are now being explored around that, and working with builders and being able to bring things closer to the edge than what I think earlier was going. You're seeing a lot of rapid change. So. On the use cases itself, right now it's kind of similar. I think it's more of like an intranet of AI agents right now instead of the internet of AI agents, which, using that analogy, we're getting to, I think the most external I'm seeing in a lot of ways is like more the customer support side of the house. But if you think about the internal use cases that we see a lot around HCM, the work around, people and just the management and so forth of people, document work streams, document processing and so forth, both internal with our own systems, but in what we provide, but also what the builders are building on top of OCI.
So I wanted to maybe take a more of a customer perspective. Each of you work with end customers. And try to kind of get their sense of how do they perceive the value of agents, because depending on who you talk to, agents are either going to like completely replace humans, or agents need a lot of human in the loop, right? So what are some of the learnings from successful implementation of agents, right? And how do you kind of have that conversation of value with a customer? Because ultimately it translates to both sort of economic value for you as providers, but also for them, in terms of how they measure it.
Yeah. Well, there's two ways, right, that you can think about it. Some customers are looking, and most customers are looking this through efficiency gains. What it means, like you can do more with the people that you have, or you don't need as many people to achieve the same thing. And then there are people that look at like revenue generating use cases, right? So we have a telecom, for example, that decided to start a new line of business around money lending. But in order to get that money lending kind of like strategy going, they would have to hire a huge team. What they decided to do was instead building agents to do all the analysis, the pre-approval of this kind of like credits and all that, and launch that new line of business and try it out. And eventually, if that works, then you scale that up. And on the other side, you look at a customer, I can't name the customer, but they have 680 like beverage brands. So it's kind of like a pretty big CPG. And their goal is in the next 5 years, cut $1 billion through agents. Wow. And the way that they're doing that, I would say that the main thing is not the tech. Like the tech is in there. It's around learning. It's around
so
like allowing
$1
billion
billion of incremental revenue or savings.
They want to do both. That's the thing in 5 years. So it's insane. So what they're doing is they're creating this whole strategy for training their team across the globe with a strategy that they very cleverly named jet skis, because you can only feed 3 people in a jet ski if you really try for it. So they would send these small jet skis into different zones, implement pockets of use cases, and then eventually bringing what they're calling bigger support boats to help them scale. But it's very interesting. We're running a huge prototype of end-to-end automating the entire business in Canada for them first. So we're going to see what that looks like first, but already like seeing results in Brazil, UK, India, and across the globe. But it's interesting. There's different ways up to the mountain, right? But I think that if I had to name the one thing that companies now are realizing that is fundamental to get to success is actually training, because building these agentic systems is fundamentally different from building traditional software. Yeah. So there's an element of like learning how to do it, and a lot of these companies don't have the skills just yet.
Yeah, and Ritika, I mean, you guys are obviously a research entity. You're a large enterprise yourself, as well as provider of agents, right? So how do you see this?
Well, I think Joel's characterization of you're using the technology to either save money or to make money. That is at a very 1,000-foot level. But when we look at, we had over 2,500 engagements that we've done in the agentic space since the beginning of the year. And when we look at what the difference is between those who really see the ROI and those that don't, it actually starts with, do you really have a use case? And is the use case really something that you're thinking through of how you're going to change your process, how you're going to change how you skill your people? That actually was the biggest driver. And I know it's not a technology answer, but it is the answer that we see. Do you know what outcomes that you want to drive? So for those that already have assistants that are in the customer care space, what added value are you giving your end users? Are you showing them different products in your portfolio? Are you sending them, like in one of the healthcare provider implementations that we had, where they had an assistant before and they're moving to agentic, can they now route them to the particular kind of care, to the particular doctor that they need without help? And that improves and experience. So I think it all starts with, what is the use case? Are you really, really sure about the outcomes that you want to drive from that use case? What kind of skills do you need, not just on the technology side, but especially on the business side? Because like the same kind of processes that you had for software development lifecycle don't apply. Just as Joel kind of mentioned, really taking a look at how the process in an agentic world is going to be different is important. And so always start with those outcomes, with the process changes, with the people changes that you need, because the technology, as we all see, is evolving at such a rapid pace that you really need to start with the outcomes and the skilling. How do you lower that threshold of skilling for the business people as well as the technologists within the organization?
That makes a lot of sense. It turns out, I guess, first principles always apply, right? Which is, customer use case, customer value, irrespective whether it's AI or any other technology.
And so what we're seeing is we had centers of excellence when AI and ML came out, when automation was really driving a lot of things. We're seeing a lot of that now as to how do you drive a center of excellence to help not just the building of these agents, but how are you reskilling organizations to think about how to do their work differently, which becomes really, really critical.
Yeah, makes sense. Your perspective, Itai.
So I think that there are generally two axes to make agents successful in an organization. You have the capability of how capable an AI can be, and then you have consistency. How consistent and how consistently good and can that provide value, right? So you start with the value, and then you're saying okay, between capability and consistency, how can you go up those two values? And the thing is that for most enterprises, for most companies, a lot of that knowledge is trapped within individuals, right? You have these experts, whether it's a customer service agent that would knows all the answers, knows where to get the answers, and a big part of that, to Joel's point, is how do you train the AI, and how do you kind of suck that expertise into something that can be leveraged and scaled up across the organization. So, rather than thinking about the technology and kind of how do we, create this type of agent or this type of newest technology, focusing on the value, and as Nitika says as well, on the and on the outcome, you start from there and figure out where's that expertise, where's the data, where's the knowledge that you need to train the AI so that it can actually scale up for your entire organization.
Yeah, makes sense. And Chad, how do you guys see it from, again, you're a large application provider, you say you don't have a ton of applications.
Yeah, I think ultimately, understanding use cases is extremely important, and probably all starts there. What is going to be the impact for your customer, whether internal, external, whatnot. I think also, when you apply it yourself, talking about the development paradigm shifting and how you develop these systems, I think you have to look inward on also using these kind of agents and tools on your own development processes, which will make you smarter for what you need to do for your customers and so forth. Like an example, Uber, shared, great partner of ours, customer of ours, talking about how much development time they've saved, which also makes them smarter about now what use cases does it make sense to go apply. But once you've landed that, I think the accuracy, consistency, very important. But the one thing that we tend to forget, especially early on, is the latency aspect of it. When an agent doesn't give feedback at a pace at which people use, the adoption is much more difficult. And so that's where understanding from an infrastructure provider, how do you provide the performance, the consistency, where you need it, at what point, how do you think about how to distribute your systems perhaps and the infrastructure to support these things. And then after that, cost predictability, becomes an extremely important, side. And then I mentioned observability earlier too, with agents fail.
Yep.
What happens? Why did it fail? How do I provide the user feedback? Because if you're not, adopting these things, it doesn't matter the use cases and so forth.
Yeah, makes sense. So maybe I'll go to sort of the rapid fire round, and I'll give you guys each a question based on sort of what you've been working on. And Chad, maybe we'll start with you. You guys made a big splash, or rather, the markets made the big splash for you a few weeks back with the whole sort of Oracle as a GPU provider. It feels like we're sort of in the next phase of the web scaler. We all used to worry about compute and storage, and that became sort of, a given. Right now, we're sort of in this GPU phase. How do you, as a platform provider, see the evolution, and what are you seeing in terms of GPU usage? If you're an enterprise, right, or even a startup, right, how do they think about sort of access to GPUs and being able to have a predictable way to kind of scale your company or your application?
Yeah, it's a really tough problem. I mean, it's like a gold rush, and I think we are in a slowly getting to a transition point, around that. But it doesn't. Regardless, still massive clusters are being built. The top few big ones are, grabbing as many as they can. I think what's going on right now is it's less about going out and acquiring as many GPUs as you can, whether you're an enterprise or whatnot. It's starting to be more of like, GPU strategy. How do you lay out? Now that I think people are getting smarter about a hybrid type of environment where you can actually do small models on the edge, you can do, all the way up to working with, frontier models, through APIs and whatnot. So the other side of it too is all those guys at the top consuming all these they want the latest and greatest.
Yeah.
And so that also means it's starting to free up, 2 generations back,
right?
Which I think is appropriate for a lot of enterprise.
You may not need like the latest and greatest GPU for your use case, right?
Exactly, for these. So I think you're getting there. And then I think if you're a large enterprise, you have to think about scaling across departments. A lot of different enterprises will come and be like, I need to get, mine. I think the economics only work when you start thinking about how to converge your investments around the infrastructure you're going to run, both on premises as well as in cloud.
Yeah.
And start getting those economic benefits of going across that. The nice thing, and that's where we continue to invest. Everything from running edge in your data center, up to OCI. But it's definitely a hard challenge.
Yeah, awesome. And Itai, I think in a lot of ways, sort of Salesforce, had this famous logo with software with a slash through it, right? So you defined sort of software in the SaaS era. So as we're making this transition to agents, so what does the future of software look like, right? In this sort of new AI-driven world.
Yeah, so we like to call it digital labor, right? And having kind of Mark Bainef, our co-founder and CEO, said, we're the last generation to manage only humans. And so in some ways, that's kind of like, okay, so we're now going to have AI as part of our teams, and what does that look like? And we're very kind of very strong in terms of believing that humans and agents work together. It's not that all of a sudden agents are going to take some of the jobs and then humans are going to be either left aside or taking other jobs. It's how do you actually integrate AI with your teams? Ethan Malik earlier had some really interesting and powerful message around, have your team actually leverage it every day, invite AI to your meetings, and integrate with it all the time, because this is like the best way to learn how to actually work together with it. And that's the way that you get the best results. So the way that we're seeing the future of agents is really integrating it into everything that you do. And in the end, I mean, I think that we're right now in an age of kind of like the dial-up modem, like 56K modem, and AOL, like you're logging into the internet.
Yeah.
Remember those days? So right now we're kind of
Some of us do.
Some of us at least, right? But like you're logging into an AI, you're chatting with an AI. It's just going to be ambient. Like ambient intelligence is going to be part of every single process that we do. And so it's not going to be this separate thing of like, oh, I'm going to use AI, I'm going to use an agent for this. It's just going to be part of the fabric of what we do.
Yeah. And Ritika, I know IBM's been sort of, a software provider, technology provider, solution provider. And there was a discussion earlier with Ethan as well in terms of, is it now the era of services software, right? And there's so many intersection points between services and software. And we as investors kind of, are rethinking essentially how do we, what does an ideal company construct look like, right? From your vantage point, like how do you see the role of services in this sort of transition?
Yeah, there are probably three particular areas I think about. So the first is, and I think you talked about how you call them digital labor. Think about any GSI out there, including our IBM consulting organization. You're going to have digital workers that now work with your service provider to be able to provide a outcome or task. There's not one that doesn't do it, and if you're not doing it, that means that you're falling way behind. So I think there's one of just the services organization in itself is going to have these digital workers that are always going to live alongside your consultants that you have in an organization. The second is we're still really early days in this agentic landscape. And the amount of help that people need, when I said the biggest inhibitor is what outcome, how do your processes change, how are your people going to be skilled up? That is an immense opportunity for, I think, a lot of services organizations to be able to help many of us really understand what does it mean to rethink our processes? What does it mean to rethink our skill sets? And the third area is, and I think Itai kind of talked about this a little bit, was now every piece of software that you have is going to be agentified. And if you think about it, the user interfaces in itself aren't going to be as important because everything is going to be an MCP server. It's a MCP server away, and so that interaction paradigm completely changes. And so software in itself has this view of this mesh world. And so for us, it's also one of the reasons why we established an AI Labs organization, because for the skills, the processes, the way the software in itself, you're going to be interacting with it in such a different way, it requires a new set of skill sets.
Yeah, it makes sense. And you guys actually see this in a day-to-day basis because you're partnering with folks like Crew AI to implement a lot of these agents, right? And so, Joe, coming to you, you're literally in the belly of the beast in San Francisco, right, where it feels like it's Paris during the Renaissance, right? It's all happening there. And you yourself moved from Brazil to relocate to San Francisco. So give us sort of a ground level view of, just what does this moment mean? The pace is so rapid. Sometimes I'm from the Bay Area as well. Feels like we're in a bubble, right? It's like, AGI is going to be here tomorrow, and then there's the reality of, solutions actually being deployed. You straddle both worlds, so, give us a view from as a founder, as a builder. What are you seeing?
Yeah, it's interesting because there's so much happening in the Bay Area, and not only the Bay Area. Let's say on the cutting edge, right? And the reason, the way that I would put this is, let's work on first principles. The genie is not getting back into the bottle, right? People are not going to stop using AI, and people are not going to stop using AI agents. And it's a matter of time, but this is going to get permeated into every single company out there. Now, the difference between a company adopting this in the Bay Area with cutting edge talent and having the skills and talking with the right people, and let's say people across the globe or Middle America trying to figure it out, there is a difference in there. And I would say that for that to happen, you gotta lower the friction to get this AI agents deployed. And lowering this friction here means a combination of three things. It needs to be extremely easy to use, right? So it needs to be extremely easy for any people, technical or non-technical, to be able to do this. It needs to be trustworthy in terms of being reliable and repeatable, so you know that you're going to get reliable outputs. It needs to be manageable, right? Otherwise, you don't have governance.
Right.
Otherwise, you don't understand what data is going in or data is going out. You open yourself for a new vector of attack. So I would say that the combination of these three things, being easy of use, something that you can trust, and something that you can manage and scale, is probably going to be the main difference that is going to unlock the same sort of energy and fast pacing adoption you see in some of these highly technical areas across the entire globe. And I guess we're lucky that we have so many smart people in here that are working on that as well, together with Crew AI and the team. So very excited about it.
Awesome. We'd love to explore a lot more of these, but we're getting the hook. So thank you so much for participating in the panel. Appreciate your insights. Thank you.
Thank you.